What's up, guys? It's Friday night, and I just got home from a soccer game, and I need to ice the heck out of my legs right now. So I'm gonna talk to you guys while I do that. Mr. Matty P from Circana shared an interesting tidbit today about the income of people that are buying video game consoles, or at least the people that have bought video game consoles over this past holiday season. As many of you remember, there was data shared back in November for Black Friday that highlighted how many fewer people were actually buying consoles this year. And of course, this led Nintendo fans to immediately jump in and blame the economy for the Switch 2's poor sales in November. Because obviously, November was, I think, Nintendo's worst November probably since the Wii U days, if you're not counting the 3DS being sold at the same time. And honestly, the December didn't fare much better. I think during the Switch's lifetime, there was only a single December that was worse than the amount of units that were sold this year, and if I remember correctly, it was last year. So basically, every year of the Switch 1's life, aside from last year, had more units sold in December than what the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 together just managed to pull off this year. So the point is that the holiday numbers were very much down for Nintendo. When you're comparing just the Switch 2 in comparison to what the Switch 1 was able to do in 2017, it was down between 35 and 40% across both months. And Sony, depending on how you look at it, also struggled because they were down roughly 40% in comparison to the units that were sold last year. Now, in general, people were blaming the economy. I personally blame the prices of the consoles. Matt Piscatella also shared a very interesting tidbit back then of the average price of game consoles that were purchased over this holiday season. And they were roughly $200 more than what was sold before. So naturally, game consoles have effectively doubled in price. That means sales have lowered. This does not surprise me in the slightest. And likewise is the data that was shared by Matt Piscatella today, or rather a day or two ago. 53% of US video game hardware buyers in the fourth quarter of 25 had a household income of $100,000 or more, which was a record high and up from 40% in the first quarter of 2022. The average price of video game hardware in the US was $373 in quarter 1 of 2022, jumping up to $446 by Q4 of 2025. So, again, game console prices go up, which means you have to be in a higher income bracket in order to afford those games. And likewise, over that same period, the percent of video game hardware buyers that had household incomes of less than $50,000 fell from 31% in Q1 2022 to 19% in Q4 of 2025. And even beyond that, 50 to 75 went from 17% to 14%, while 75 to 100 increased from 12 to 14%. So it's a big shift. Now, in fairness, I believe from 2022 until now, there was also a significant increase in the number of people that have actually a higher income, that are making more than 100,000, I should say. So incomes have actually gone up, which will skew the data just a little bit. But obviously, the amount that income has gone up does not match how much more expensive everything is. This is known. So let me make something very clear. The economy is not good. We know it's not good. This is not an argument to try to defend the economy. I am not trying to make this political. I am not anti-anything except for high video game prices. I hate them. Or rather, I prefer when there are budget options. If you'd like to talk about politics, find me in real life, meet me, and we'll go out for coffee and discuss it. But on this channel, I talk about video games. Now, the economy is bad. There's no question about that. And that was an argument that I was making all the way back in April when I first made my video about not buying the Switch 2. I didn't like that Nintendo decided to make the massive jump in their console in this year specifically. But it's not just Nintendo that's creating this problem. And obviously, I've already discussed Nintendo quite a bit on this channel. Sony is a big part of this problem as well. So Nintendo, their new console is significantly more expensive, and they also increased the price of their budget console, which is the last gen one, which is the Switch 1. And since they haven't made any appealing Switch Lite models, plus, the Switch Lite user base is already massive as it is, so how many more people are you actually going to get to buy this thing? You've taken away a lot of the incentive for people to buy into the budget Nintendo console. Or the people that wanted a budget Nintendo console basically already own one. In the case of Sony, it's a bit of a different problem. Now, I think Sony is not too upset with the numbers that they saw over this holiday season, and I actually think that they had intended to get these kind of numbers. But that's not a good thing for the customer. It's a good thing for Sony, because they have a 5-year-old console where they did not drop the price on. But for us, we suffer. We the customer, we the gamers. Generally speaking, a console that is 5 years out will have gotten some major discounts. Now, in the US specifically, the discounts that we see for the PlayStation 5 are between $400 to $450 depending on if you're buying digital or if you're buying physical. Or should I say if you're buying the digital-only console versus the one with the disc drive. And obviously, I am not including the Pro model in this discussion. Those prices, they're just launch prices for the PS5. They're not even the lowest prices that we've seen. So Sony effectively is charging the exact same price for the PS5 as they did 5 years ago. So now, during this year, when people were going in the holiday season to buy a brand new console, they didn't find a brand new Sony console available at a budget price. Now, to be fair, we have the same issue with the Xbox Series S, but I don't know how many people were still interested in buying an Xbox at this point in time. The Xbox Series S also used to bring down the average. It was around $300 at launch, and it regularly saw details where it dropped down to $250 and lower. And likewise with the Xbox Series X. Right now it's very expensive, but it had gone down to close to $400, and if you shopped around, you could easily get it for $350 during the holiday seasons in previous years. But even then, if you put those deals into perspective, even in previous years, in comparison to what we're dealing with right now, in the last generation, when the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were about 4, 5, 6 years old, you were able to grab them at roughly 50% of the price that they had launched at. Whereas with the PS5, especially the disc model, it launched at $500. You can't even imagine it going for $300 right now. That would make people so excited to go and buy it. The Nintendo Switch, the OG Switch, it never dropped in price. It went down to $300, but it would pack in a game. But the thing is with the Switch is they always had the light model, so they already had the budget model. So even if they didn't have a crazy deal for the holiday season, they had the cheap model available. The point is, all three of these companies have effectively found a way to make it so that when somebody's going to the store to buy a video game console, they're priced out of it. Whether it's a brand new Nintendo Switch 2 at 50% of the launch price that the previous console had, or an Xbox and a PS5, which are either the same price or more expensive than they were 5 years ago, something that had never been seen in any previous generation, and it was a trend that started with the Nintendo Switch 1. So as much as I would love to stand together and blame the economy for these stats that Matt Piscatella has been sharing, the reality is we've been through bad economies. We've gone through some terrible recessions. We've gone through some crappy situations financially. We've gone through market crashes. But in every one of those years prior to that, we saw game consoles not just sell well, we saw them break records. Video games used to be a very affordable outlet for people, and the hardware entry for those was never this much of an issue. Now, to be completely fair, I also think that these companies are struggling to incentivize people to update their consoles. So for example, these are hardware sales numbers that are going down. There could be many people that have a PlayStation 4, they could upgrade to a PS5, but there's still a massive amount of games on the PS4 that they're enjoying, whether it's a free-to-play title or a title that would be the same thing on the PS5, which just would run better. So they don't necessarily feel the need to upgrade, right? Like my nephew is a major Fortnite kid. He grew up in that generation, especially during COVID days. He was really excited to get a PS5 in 2021 and 2022 because, it was the popular thing to do. All the kids around him in school were upgrading their consoles. They were getting PS5s. But I remember back then I sat him down and I was like, what do you play? And he told me Minecraft and Fortnite. So I was like, do you want to get a PS5 to play something new, or are you just going to keep playing these games? And he was straight up. He's like, no, I'm just going to keep playing Fortnite and I'm going to keep playing Minecraft. So he had his own birthday money saved up, plus the allowance that he was getting and everything. So I told him, I was like, yo, you could upgrade this console, or you could have that money and spend it on something else. If you're going to be playing the same games, what's the point in upgrading? I was surprised because he was a middle schooler at the time and he ended up not buying the PS5. He waited. He was like, yeah, I thought about it. $500 is a lot of money. Why would I waste that money if I'm going to be playing the same game anyway? And quite frankly, I think there's a very similar situation that's going on with the Nintendo Switch 2 right now in comparison to the Switch 1. Many people, even if they wanted to spend the money, they're seeing what the value is of these consoles that are more expensive and they're comparing it to what they already have, and they're just not seeing the value in it. Whether it's a parent not buying it for their kids, or whether it's a kid who's like, I can either buy this or I can get a new tablet or a new bike or a scooter. I don't know what kids buy these days. I'm way too old. But the value proposition for these brand new consoles is just not quite there for that generation of gamers. So obviously, who's the one that's buying these brand new consoles? Who's the one that's still upgrading? It's us. It's our generation. It's anybody from the age of, it's a pretty big range, probably from 20 to 45, professionals Gamers that grew up upgrading their consoles and, console warring and being dedicated to a single platform at all times. We've been conditioned. We buy the console. We stick with it for 5 to 10 years, maybe even fewer than that if you're somebody that likes to upgrade early. And then either in the case of the Switch 2, you're somebody that's like, I got to get the new console as soon as it comes out. Or in the case of the PS5, you're like, well, it's 5 years. I'm ready to upgrade now. And it's just the natural order of life. The lower income families are like, no, just keep the same old console and keep playing the same games you were playing. And the kids are happy. So what's the point in upgrading at that point? The prices are high enough where people have to think about it logically. So it's not only unaffordable to many of them, even if it is affordable, it becomes a question of whether it's worth the value. And in the past, you didn't have to think that much about whether it was worth the value or not because it was affordable. And here's the funny thing too, right? Like people come and tell me that I'm villainizing Nintendo for this. Now I do villainize Nintendo. I'm not going to try to back away from that. But they're telling me that I'm villainizing Nintendo when in actuality, it's a greater economic issue. And here's the reason why I struggle with that. I struggle with that belief. And it's not just a Nintendo, this is the gaming industry in general. Nintendo and Sony, especially, are doing very well. Do you understand? Their numbers are going up. They have done nothing but succeed over and over and over again. So I see a bad economy, and I see customers that are struggling with this bad economy, and I see game companies that are flourishing. Like their profits, I don't think they've ever been higher than they are right now. And yet, all of their game consoles are not going down in price. And if anything, they're going up in price. They're charging more than you would have ever expected in this industry. So why would I not villainize the greedy corporation and call them what they are? Greedy corporations. Why would I not say that Nintendo is absolutely ripping us off? Their numbers are phenomenal while the economy is struggling, and they just don't care. They're like, forget the lower income people. We're going to try to milk the richer ones as best as we can. Because their whole model this generation is to look at Sony. And they're like, that's what they're doing, right? This whole Switch 2 generation has been the most Sony experience we've seen from Nintendo in decades. They named it the Switch 2. The only innovation was a stronger performance. They jumped up the price so it can match the Sony console. They're releasing fewer exclusives. They're spacing out their releases. They're focusing more on their subscription. They're focusing more on getting more users into free-to-play titles. They're focusing more on third-party games. They're trying to make more money off of DLC, off of upgrades. These are proven successful Sony and Xbox tactics. Obviously, Xbox is not really in the discussion as much anymore. But these are very much things that we in the early 2010s were disgusted at Sony and Xbox for. That's part of the reason why Nintendo fans felt safe in the Nintendo atmosphere. They're like, oh, it's not doing what they're doing. It's doing its own thing. It's being a classic gaming device where you buy the hardware, it's affordable, and the games are awesome, and they're exclusive to this console, and they're made with the first-party heart that you're come to expect. But now Nintendo is doing nothing special. It's just becoming one of them. And actually, it's worse because the hardware is inferior, but the prices match. And the problem is when you get to that price point, you lose out on so many people that would have bought in without thinking about it. Again, that's all the data that Matt Piscatella has been sharing. The prices of the game consoles are going up, so I'm not surprised there are fewer sales. And I'm not surprised that you have to be more rich to be able to afford these things. You can't have companies that are flourishing price people out and then blame the economy. That's just not how it works. Look at the Xbox ROG Ally. All right, that's the new white handheld gaming PC that came out. The white one was like the budget model. The more expensive one came out at $1,000, and this one I think was at $700 at launch. It's only been 3 months, mind you. Like, it's a fairly recent launch. It's not an Xbox, though. It's more like a handheld PC. The Xbox name kind of doesn't really make sense here. But anyway, this thing, if you look up reviews for it, and you look up conversations on it, either on Reddit or on random message boards, look up videos on YouTube, everybody hated it. They slated it off. They're like, this is the biggest waste of money I could ever possibly imagine. Because they were releasing the budget handheld at $700, and the problem is the specs for this thing did not match the $700 price tag that it had. Now, pretty quickly after launch, since November, the prices dropped down to below $500. I think it was exactly at $500, and sometimes it's hovering now around like $480. It is now highly being recommended as the best budget option entry to the handheld PC gaming world. Now, I don't know if I fully agree with this sentiment, but I'm also somebody that's willing to buy something used and shop around a bit. But if you look at brand new prices, it is in the discussion. Obviously, because the LCD Steam Deck has been discontinued, so you don't have like that cheap $400 entry point anymore. And, Valve was very generous with their deals, so often people were able to grab it for $320. As a matter of fact, my cousin got one for $270 because PayPal had a deal where it was giving you 20% off over the holiday season. So the Steam Deck was already at $320, plus he got another 20% off. Then he loves the Steam Deck. He's somebody that only ever had a PlayStation 4 and a Nintendo Switch, and he was supposed to get a Switch 2 this year. But he decided to jump on the Steam Deck as part of the whole thing where all of us now are getting these handheld gaming devices. And mind you, my nephew, coincidentally, 2 days ago actually also got himself the Xbox ROG Ally, the same white one that I'm talking about right now, open box for $380 plus tax from Best Buy. So your mileage may vary, but look at the open box section near Best Buy's. But the point is, now there are people that are recommending this device, even at the brand new price of $480, because now you can actually think about it with a clear mind with the value that's being offered. Prices matter. And I've noticed in this industry, there are many people, weirdly enough, online that really try to shrug off the prices. Genuinely, I think it's a Nintendo fan thing. There are two things that I've noticed through my time as a Nintendo fan that we always tend to shrug off in discussions. And this is something that I noticed about myself as well as the other Nintendo fans around me online prior to the Switch 2 even being a thing. Nintendo fans generally like to pretend that the price of the console has nothing to do with the reason that people purchase it, right? We like to believe that even if the Nintendo console was the same price as the PlayStation 5, which now it is, people are going to buy it regardless, because the value of Nintendo is in its titles. It's not because it's a low cost of entry. And I've always disagreed with this. Every single Nintendo console has struggled because of its higher point of entry. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Nintendo Switch 2 just had the worst holiday you could possibly imagine for a brand new Nintendo console. It's the highest price launch ever. The Wii U and the 3DS both had massive jumps from their previous console, but lo and behold, they both struggled as soon as they came out the door. And look, this is not limited to Nintendo, even outside of Nintendo, right? The PlayStation consoles were always more expensive, but that PS3 was so much more expensive that it struggled out the door. And the Xbox One was so much more expensive that it struggled out the door. But the Nintendo fans, I noticed this before, and I especially started noticing it now with the launch of the Switch 2, like to pretend that Nintendo was not successful because of the price. They think that had little to do with it. They think it's more to do with the quality of the Nintendo games, where in reality, it's a combination of both. But the price point definitely hits that blue ocean audience, which makes up a significant portion of the Nintendo fandom, more than you would think. And then obviously the second thing that I feel like Nintendo fans like to close their ears and pretend doesn't exist in this discussion is the very likely reality that the user basis for the Nintendo consoles, specifically for the Nintendo Switch, is obviously a lot smaller than the numbers would suggest because of how many people either buy multiple Switch consoles in the same house, or even they themselves decide to upgrade their console mid-gen. For example, a parent may buy a single PlayStation 5 for their 3 children, but if they're buying Nintendo Switch Lites, they'll buy 3 Switch Lites for their kids. And likewise, somebody that has a PlayStation 4, and then all of a sudden the PS4 Pro comes out, and it's pretty expensive in comparison to all the other game consoles out there, they would think a lot more about whether or not they would upgrade their console. But hey, if I have a Nintendo Switch, and that Switch Lite looks like it's a little bit more portable, so I don't mind dropping $200 on that. It's fairly affordable. And then the OLED comes out, it's like, oh yeah, it's $350. I haven't bought a new Switch in 3 or 4 years. It's much easier to jump into those lower price points and have multiple consoles in one household, whether it's for the same user or whether it's for the people that are around you. So it's very likely that while there are 150 plus Switch 1s sold out there, the user base might actually not be that much larger than some of the consoles that may have sold, 20 to 30% fewer units. But then, they'll deny that fact and then immediately talk about how the PS2 was only as successful as it was because it had a DVD player. I think the truth for both of these things lies somewhere in the middle. But anyway, the point that I am trying to make with all of this is that the prices of these consoles are going up, so naturally, fewer people are interested in buying game consoles. And the patterns, especially in this holiday season, are a clear indication that there is going to continue to be a slowdown in the console market. And that could mean that more people are going to stick with the consoles they have from last gen. That could mean that more people are going out and they're buying something used. Or it could even mean that tablets and mobile gaming and PC gaming is just increasing that much that it's genuinely starting to affect the hardware sales. So now these companies have no choice but to charge more money so they can make more profits off of the old people like us that grew up off of consoles and we're going to stick with them forever. Genuinely, I think it's a combination of all of that. But ultimately, Sony, Nintendo, and yes, even Xbox they're basically bowing out, but they're still there. Their lack of competitive prices, their lack of lowering the prices to discounts in the same way that they always have in previous generations, is ultimately the main reason that the sales were slower during this holiday season. And it's the main reason why the average income for the buyers went up. And I think it would be foolish to think otherwise. I think it would be foolish to just completely ignore that fact. And their hands are not tied. As long as they continue to show record profits in every single one of their quarterly reports, Sony and Nintendo, they're not innocent in this. They're ripping off the people that are willing to spend, and they're ignoring those that can't afford it. All right, this ice pack is starting to melt, so I'm gonna catch you guys later. Thank you for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.